So just a couple of months ago, I did a sponsored build video with the Endorphy ARC 700 Air. That was a new mid-tower chassis. It was actually the first to be entirely designed and built in-house by Endorphy. It came with 540mm fans, a mesh front, and a budget price tag. Well, today I'm looking at another new case from Endorphy, the ARX 500. It has a lot of the same features as the ARC 700. It comes in two different versions, with or without RGB. It's more compact and cheaper than the ARC 700. But is it any good? Let's find out. So in terms of features of the ARX 500, it has a spacious interior. You can fit up to 7 fans in either of these cases. As I say, the non-RGB version comes with 5 regular plain black 140mm fans. They are the Endorphy Stratus 140s. The ARGB version comes with 4 ARGB fans, both PWM controlled. Both cases come with a PWM fan hub included. You can connect up to 5 fans to the fan hub. But the ARGB version also comes with an ARGB control, and again you can fit up to 5 ARGB products to that. It doesn't have to be fans, you could fit some LED strips or some other RGB products. These are all 3-pin 5V ARGB, so as long as the ARGB item has 3-pin 5V, you can connect it up to that controller. The front and top panels are made from perforated steel, ultra-fine mesh, so they don't have additional dust filters, so it's just a single layer dust filter. This is obviously better for airflow, less restriction with just a single air filter, and as I say, it's ultra-fine mesh, so it's all combined into the mesh panels. Both those mesh panels are easily removable for cleaning, and you can also see on the case, on the left-hand side panel, it has a tempered glass side panel. It's a compact case, so it's more compact than the ARC 700. It measures 486 by 228 by 429 millimeters, but it does allow for the installation of up to 360mm radiators in the front and a 280mm radiator in the top of the case. In terms of front I/O connectivity, so it's along the top side of the chassis. There's a power button there, reset button, 2 USB type A ports, 2 3.5mm audio jacks for headphones and microphones, and just a single USB type C port. Also on the top panel, the reset button can be repurposed for ARGB lighting control and connected up to the included controller inside the ARGB version. So on paper, the ARX 500 sounds pretty decent. It's good that you get that choice with the two different versions with RGB fans or no RGB. I'd like to see a white version. I think white PCs or white builds seem to be becoming even more popular these days, and it'd be good if you could get this in white, same as the ARX 700. I'd like to see that in white as well. I'm going to concentrate on this ARGB version for the review. I'll be doing the build in this case. So let's take a closer look. As I say, on the left hand side you've got a tempered glass side panel, and that is easily removable. There's just 2 captive thumb screws, and it just slides backwards and releases, and you can see it's got a reasonably heavy tinted side panel, but you can still see through it pretty easily, and you can see into the system and see all the expensive hardware that you've splashed out all your money on. The front panel is one of the main design features of this case, so it's an ultra fine mesh front panel, so it also acts as the dust filter as well as allowing airflow into the system. The middle part of the front panel is removable, and you can see there ultra fine mesh, and then also you can take the whole frame off as well, so that unclips out, and there's some smaller ultra fine mesh vents down the side there. They don't look easily removable. They've got those tabs that you have to bend back on the mesh, so they don't look that easy to remove, but there are some screws there as well, so if you unscrew them and bend those tabs back, you will probably be able to get that out for cleaning if you need to. And then behind the mesh panel with the ARGB version, you get 3 of the Endorphy Stratus 140 ARGB fans. They come with the case, and then another 140 in the rear. You can also see there's a ton of thumb screws in here, but these are really tight from the factory, so you have to loosen them off with a screwdriver to begin with. And once you've loosened them off, you can take all these thumb screws out this whole front radiator panel can be removed, and you can put that onto the bench if you want to install some different fans, or you want to install a radiator in there. Put it onto your bench, install your fans in your radiator, clip it back in place, and then reinstall the screws. It's quite easy to use, so that's a nice design feature as well. I see this a lot with cases now. They have these removable fan brackets. It does make installation, especially if you've got a radiator, a little bit more easily. Ultrafine mesh on the top as well. That panel's also removable, just a single captive thumb screw in there. You can see that's an ultrafine mesh panel as well. Inside it's pretty spacious, so you've got space at the front of the case for up to a 360mm radiator or 343 120 fans. You can see the fans are installed on kind of the outside of the front panel, which then leaves enough space inside for probably up to a 30mm thick radiator. Good thing about that is the fans don't interfere with graphics card length, so the maximum graphics card that is supported in here, I think, is up to 350mm, and that doesn't matter whether you have fans installed or not. As well as the front radiator mounting, you also have top radiator mounting, so in the top you can fit either two 120mm fans, two 140 fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. The AUX 500 supports up to ATX motherboard form factor, so there's no eATX support, but you can install ATX, micro ATX and mini ATX. Maximum CPU cooler height is 179mm tall, which sounds really generous. I think that should be enough for even the biggest dual tower air coolers. At the back of the case there's 7 PCIe slots, but there's no vertical slot, so no vertical GPU mounting unless you buy one of those adapters that fills up all the 7 PCIe slots. Maximum graphics card length is 350mm, so that is without a radiator installed. Obviously installing a radiator will reduce it slightly. There's various cutouts around the motherboard tray and on the power supply shroud. You can see at the bottom of the power supply shroud there's one towards the front for the PCIe cables routing to the graphics card. A couple more here that don't have grommets on, and then there's another 3 upside of the motherboard tray and another one at the top there, all with rubber grommets installed. Spin the case round, and at the other side, on the right hand side, there's just a plain steel side panel. Again, this is held in place with 2 captive thumb screws. Again, you slide that back and it removes, and you can see it is just a plain steel side panel. There's no sound dampening material or anything on here. It's got a bit of flex in the side panel, but it's nothing out of the ordinary, especially for a case in this budget price range. You can see around this side you've already got quite a lot of cables to manage because of all the fans that come pre-installed, and because they're RGB fans they have RGB cables and they have the PWM cable, but it's pretty neatly organised. There's a central spine for the cable management, and there's plenty of cable tie down points and eyelets and stuff like that. If you see this motherboard tray, it kind of bends in. There's like a recessed part towards the front, which should help with the cable management. I'd say probably at its shortest point there's about 20mm of space for cable management, and then this recessed part probably gives you another 10mm of space, so that seems pretty good. And like I say, there's plenty of cutouts around this motherboard tray, so you shouldn't have any problems routing cables through. In terms of maximum power supply length, you can see there's a lot of space down at the bottom. There's no hard drive caddy that's removable or anything like that, and you can fit power supplies up to 300mm long. So again, I can't think of any power supply that shouldn't be able to fit in here without too much difficulty. In terms of storage space, so there's 2 2.5-inch drive mounts on top of the power supply shroud, but the case supports a total of 6 2.5-inch SSDs. So there's those 2 on top of the power supply shroud. There's another 2 here on the back of the motherboard tray. It took me a while to figure out where the other 2 were. Well, they're actually up here, kind of in the chassis frame at the back, and you just put your SSD in there, line it up with the screw holes, and it'd just be mounted there with 2 screws. Included with both the AUX 500 Air and the ARGB versions, you get a 5-port PWM fan hub. That's mounted just behind the 5-port ARGB controller that comes with the ARGB version. This is a 3-pin 5-volt hub, so you can connect an additional 3-pin 5-volt product to it if you have something else to connect, because it just comes with the 4 fans connected from the factory. The floor of the case is covered with a dust filter. It kind of slides out from the front, but it's just one of those kind of floppy, really thin perforated metal filters. It does come with magnets on as well to make it a bit easier to slide it in and out, because it does flop about a bit, but you can see those magnets kind of hold it in place as you slide it in and out. So that's a dust filter for the floor, and then the floor of the case is really open and there's various perforated sections. So at the back is a big vent for the power supply fan, and then there's another vented section here to help in case you have or help with airflow if you have the fan mounted on top of the power supply shroud. Down there as well is the combined 3.5 and 2.5 inch drive bay. So as part of the case review, I always like to do a build time lapse. So if there's any issue with the case, you can see it in the build time lapse. So I just want to quickly show you what parts I'm going to be using for the build. I want to build a pretty high-end system. I want to try and push the case to its limits and see how good the airflow and cooling is. So I'm going to be using an AMD Ryzen 9 7900X CPU. Motherboard is this X670 Aorus Elite AX from Gigabyte. Graphics card is also from Gigabyte. This is the Gigabyte RTX 4070 Ti Gaming OC. Memory, I'm going to be using 32 gigabytes of Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB. This is a 2x16 gigabyte kit, 6,000 mega transfers per second. Just a single storage device, so it'll be this WD Black SN850 2 terabyte PCIe Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drive. The CPU cooler for the system is the Endorphi Navis F280, so that's a 280mm, 240mm fans all in one liquid CPU cooler. And then the power supply for the system will be the Endorphi Supremo FM5 Gold 1000 watt unit, and for the build I'm going to be using the ARX 500 ARGB version. So let's go on with the build and see how it turns out. So build's complete, system's running, everything's working as it should be, and honestly I've absolutely nothing to complain about with this case. Build went really easy and straightforward. If I was really trying to find something wrong with it, then the only thing I could say is it could do with an extra cable cutout just at the top of the motherboard tray at this side. The only reason I say that is because with some of the connections at the top in that right top corner, you do have to kind of route the cables back to the nearest cutout, which is about here. And like I said, that is really nitpicking. And maybe the cable Velcro straps at the back of the system, they might be a bit long, they're a bit fiddly to work with, and they have like a big flappy bit when you've actually tied the cables together. But other than that, honestly, this is a really good budget case. Things like installing the motherboard, aligning screw holes, lining up the graphics card, things like that, even the AIO at the top, everything lines up perfectly. Yes, some of the panels may be a little bit flimsy, such as the floor and the top panel when you take this outer panel off, but it's nothing out of the ordinary for a budget case like this. It's really difficult to find any faults with it in terms of building a system. It's a really simple case to build with. Cable management's good. There's enough space at the back of the motherboard tray, even out of the recessed area. So even the smallest area behind the motherboard tray, it's enough for cable management. So it's done a really great job. And like you can see, it's not too narrow, this case. It's quite compact, but it isn't too narrow. And that is a thing with some cases these days with these RTX 40 series cards and these adapter cables. You need a bit of space to the tempered glass side panel. This has the perfect amount. You can see there's not too much curve on that. It's not too tightly bent, and this cut out at the front on the power supply shroud. That's a good spot for it to go through and make cables look reasonably tidy. I mean, I really hate those adapters from NVIDIA, but I think in this case they look better than in some others. So really difficult to find fault with it in terms of building a system. So really we need to move on to the thermal performance and look at how it handles this relatively high-end system with this 7900X CPU and RTX 4070 Ti. So due to the way the AMD Precision Boost algorithm works, the 7900X CPU temperature is in the 90s no matter what case you use. However, 91 degrees C is good, especially considering that just a 280mm AIO was used in this build. GPU temperature is what we look at closer these days when testing case thermals, and I have to say I have never seen a more consistent chart. It doesn't seem to matter what configuration you run the case in or add a fan to the power supply shroud mount, the GPU temperature is consistently low, which shows that the airflow in the ARX 500 is nothing less than superb. As we see with thermals, again, noise levels are very even with the system under heavy load due to the stable temperature in any configuration. Fan speeds were very consistent with the case in different configurations, so noise output was almost identical no matter the configuration of the case, which again points to very good thermals with the case in its default configuration with all the panels installed. So it's an easy case to build a system in, and thermal performance is absolutely on point. It's really difficult to find faults with this case. Endorphi has done an absolutely fantastic job designing this case. You could say maybe the aesthetics look a little conservative, but with that in mind, it will probably appeal to a lot of different tastes, and it shouldn't look out of place in any gaming room, office, or any real other scenario and not be too imposing. So airflow's good, thermals are great, even on this high-end system. It's really hard to find fault with it. The only other fault I could think of is that it's not available in white. I'd like to see this case available in white. Like the ARC 700, I'd also like to see that available in white. It might be slightly lacking in terms of radiator support, but then again, it's compact size. You can fit a 360 at the front, a 280 at the top. What more do you need? If you get a good quality 280mm AIO cooler in this scenario, that is enough to cool this 7900X CPU. So as I say, it's really difficult to find fault. It's priced well. If you buy the non-RGB, the ARX 500 Air, it's under €100. This is like €20 more, and it comes with the RGB fans and the RGB controller. The RGB controller has an additional port, so you can add to that as well. So as I say, it's really difficult to find fault. It's priced well, it looks okay. Thermal performance is absolutely brilliant. It is a case that I would definitely consider buying for a budget build of my own in the future. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this review of the Endorphi ARX 500 Air and ARGB. Let us know what you think of this case in the comment section. If you've enjoyed watching the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to Kit Guru. And if you want to help support us, if you like what we do, you can always head over to the store, pick up some of our merch, or you could subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, don't forget, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.